안녕하세요. 저는 대만 성공대학교의 석사 학생 나혜의입니다. 제가 이번에 주제는 대만 당언어 분석 해가문학의 발전과정과 성립. 네, 일단 열상 고전 연구회는 발표를 기회를 주셔서 감사합니다. 제가 한국어 아직 배워서 한국어 PPT 이미 준비했는데 그래도 저는 영어를 발표하겠습니다. 죄송합니다. 예. Today I'm going to present about Unpack Taiwan's multilingualism, the developing process and establishment of Hakkanese literature. So first of all, to discuss about Hakkanese literature, we need to define that what is Hakkanese. So Hakkanese, this word could be referred to Hakkanese person, Hakkanese people, or also Hakkanese languages. In these, both the Hakkanese languages and also Hakkanese languages and also Hakkanese people are the two important elements to discuss about the literature, the establishment of Hakkanese literature. Okay, so before this, we need to talk about why Taiwan has Hakkanese people, why we have Hakkanese languages. So we need to trace back to Taiwan's historical background. So before anyone came to Taiwan, before we have any immigrants to Taiwan, Taiwan already had the indigenous people of Wonchumin. Right now, till now, there are 16 groups of different indigenous people are officially recognized in the present day. And then later half of the 17th century, Chinese Ming, Chongfonggong, and the other Ming remnants also immigrate to Taiwan. At that time, Taiwan started to have Han immigrants. They came with Chongfonggong, and Hakkanese people are also one group of those immigrants. So after generations, they immigrate to Taiwan and live at Taiwan decades. Those immigrants, those Hakka immigrants or other Han immigrants, they gradually had a geographical connection with Taiwan and also have their belongings to live in Taiwan. So Taiwan, at the end of the 17th century, we could see that Taiwan gradually became from a immigrant society, turned into a native society. Okay, so then let's deeply talk about the Taiwan Hakkanese historical background. So Hakka, these words, Hakka or Hakka in Hangul, originally means negatively. In China, Guangzhou and Zhaoqing, people call the foreigners from Guangdong other places Hakka. They call them Hakka, means that guest people. However, in the second half of the 19th century, China started to have other Western missionaries. They want to research, they want to conduct study on these people, on these Hakka people. So they try to spell the name, that how Guangzhou and Zhaoqing people call those persons Hakka. They try to spell it out. So it's spelled it out as Hakka, Hakka. So that's why English call them Hakkanese. And after Western missionaries did much research on those Hakkanese people, Hakka became a neutral name, not negatively as before. Became a neutral and representative name of people come from the same place and speak the same languages as those Guangdong people. So among those Hakkanese people, their languages are still a little bit different because according to their intonations. So they are divided to different groups according to their accents. So if we look into Taiwan's Hakkanese, we could see that actually Taiwan Hakkanese are divided into six groups from Sixian, Hailu, Nan Sixian, Dapu, Raoping, Zhaoan. Yeah.
Do you want to share website? This one? This one, okay. Do you want that? No, okay. Yes.
So I would like to play the different intonations of Hakkanese in Taiwan.
退還花
Okay, I'm so sorry how were the words, but anyway, they have the different intonations in Taiwan Hakkanese. Although they all call it Hakkanese, but they actually speak a little bit different Hakkanese in Taiwan.
So, this one? This one?
And to see the present day Taiwan Hakkanese, so according to Taiwan Hakka Council Affairs, their latest research in 2022, there are 20% of all the Taiwanese people is Hakkanese people, which is about 4.669 million people. However, this statistics is actually a little bit overestimated because Taiwan, the research is according to the Taiwan Hakkanese definitions of Taiwan Basic Act. We will see it later. So the definitions of Taiwan Hakkanese people is a little bit vague and a little bit too wide. So this also leads to the Taiwan Hakkanese literature has wide-ranging definitions. So that is that if we cannot define Taiwan Hakkanese people, who are they, then it is also hard for us to define that what is Taiwan Hakkanese literature. So we will see why it is overestimated. So the statistics is overestimated. The definitions is too wide. It's because that the crisis aware of losing Hakkanese language. So the latest research, what I just mentioned before, is based on Hakka Basic Act's definitions of Hakkanese people. So let's see the definitions. The second one. So the definitions is that Hakkanese people refer to people having Hakka blood or Hakka origin and identify themselves as Hakkanese people. So what is Hakka origin? That means that you may be like having Hakka spouse, like your wife or your husband is Hakkanese, or you living in Hakka villages, or you learning and speaking Hakkanese. But this might lead to a little bit weird situation is that, like for me, I'm a Hakkanese. If someone get married with me and then also identify himself as a Hakkanese, then he could be Hakkanese. Then this will lead to a weird, awkward situation is that in the future, Taiwan may have a lot of Hakkanese people while they cannot speak Hakkanese. So for the present day, it leads to the crisis aware of losing Hakkanese languages lead to the wide definitions in the Basic Act. For the 1980s, that time also has the crisis aware of losing Hakkanese language. That crisis aware lead to the establishment of the Hakka movement and Hakkanese literature. Let's see Taiwan Hakkanese languages laws. Hakkanese is a language spoken. There are two main reasons. So the first reason is that Hakkanese is a language spoken only within Hakkanese people. It is not as common as Taiwanese, which has about 80% of the Taiwanese population and could be commonly spoken in Taiwan. And why here I use Hokdo is because just as the last presenter just said that some Taiwanese, they think that Minam is an active name for them, but they call themselves as Taiwanese. But in order not to mix up the other all Taiwanese here, so I use the Hokdo here. And then the second reason to make Taiwan Hakkanese laws is because that the two times colonizing languages suppressing native languages. One is Japan, the other is Chinese nationalist government, Kuomintang, implemented linguistics imperialism to build imagined community to pay their loyalty to Japan government, also pay their loyalty to Kuomintang. So this one, I just want to show to you guys that Taiwan Hakkanese language law, the real example. So this is the latest exam. So there are 5 accents. They also have the advanced level Hakkanese proficiency exam. And then the first line is that the people, they enter their name, they take the exam, but only the second line is that only totally 6 people, they pass their exam.
죄송한데, 그리고 이건 위에 대법견 이거는 저 엄마예요. 네. 사실 저랑 여동생도 같이 take the exam인데, 근데 우리 다 집회예요.
그래서 we can see actually the learning languages gap between the generation of my mother, my parents, and also the generation of me. So this one is for, okay, so this one is Taiwanese native languages attrition. Why Taiwan's native languages were lost? Taiwan has had both indigenous people and immigrants since the 17th century. And this leads to at least 20 native languages till now in Taiwan. Although we cannot preserve as many as before, because some of them was harmed by the national language policy. And after 1946, Chinese nationalist governments, Kuomintang's retreat to Taiwan, people came with Chinese nationalist government, became one big group of people in Taiwan, which they are called mainlanders. And to build a loyal nation, Kuomintang launched national language policy to ask Taiwanese for only speaking Mandarin Chinese. So let's look into the national language policy. Taiwan actually had experienced 2 times national language policy, as what I just said. One was implemented under Japan's colonizers, and the other is by Kuomintang when they just moved to Taiwan. So languages actually plays a crucial role in the unity of a nation. So both Japan and Kuomintang, they try to implement the national language policy to that those people colonized by them to speak the same language and to build an imaginary nation to pay the loyal to them. And speaking native languages like indigenous language, 원주민어, Hakkanese, Kegango, Hoklo, Temango are forbidden and would be punished at that time. So when speaking national language, it was encouraged and praised. But there's a little bit differences between Japan and between the Kuomintang's national language policy is that Japan, they implemented the policy stage by stage. They not came at the first time and then implement the violent law at the first time. While the Kuomintang, when they just came in Taiwan in about 1946, they started to try to implement the national language policy. So this is the situation at that time is that language started to put the different languages started to have a social segregation. Like Mandarin Chinese is the top one, and then the other local languages are really low level at that time. So if people they speak Taiwanese native languages, their mother tongue, their language at that time would be punished. And they also even need to wear this huge like dog tag, and they need to say that I love to speak Guoyu, I love to speak a national language. I don't speak Qipangwa, I don't speak the dialect. And the slogans during that period could be like, different language cannot make nation unified. National language represents national spirit. Speaking national language is loyal to the nation. So because of these policy, Taiwan Hakkanese, they started to grow their ethnic consciousness and grow their ethnic consciousness after this long-term oppression. So Taiwanese local identity grew stronger and stronger. They tried to speak their native languages to highlight Taiwan characteristics. So but at that time, Hoklo, Temango get the highest attention. So Hakkanese people, they think that they get less attention at that time. So they try to establish and launch the Hakkanese movement at that time in 1988 to call for restoration and revitalization of the mother tongue. So the concept of Hakkanese literature and also write in our mother tongue was established at that time. So this is the establishment of the Hakka movement. So after martial law lifted and the government established bilingual news, the government tried to establish bilingual news, including Mandarin Chinese and also Temango. However, Hakkanese, they think they are ignored, so they try to establish this movement. They want to call for the attention on the Hakkanese or on other indigenous people. So we can see the first black-white picture. It writes that protest against excluding Hakkanese, and then the second picture, the colorful picture, is the Hakka Monthly. It's a magazine that it's the first magazine of Hakkanese people. They, after martial law, they started to have their own media to speak and to have their own discourse on the public area. And then the third picture, they use the national father Sun Yat-sen as the honorable leader of this Hakka movement, because it's heard that Sun Yat-sen is also a Hakkanese. So they say that it was just like if nation of the father still live, he also cannot speak his own language. So they use it as honor leader. Okay, so after this movement, Taiwan Hakkanese were united. The Hakka movement were called Restore My Mother Tongue campaign. It's because they were organized by Hakkanese people to restore Hakkanese. So it was also called the Hakka movement. And after martial law was lifted in July 1987, publications are not limited to Mandarin Chinese. So Taiwanese could also establish or publish their own works in their own languages. So Hakkanese, they started to launch their Hakkanese magazine, the Hakka Monthly, Kega Pungun, to be Hakkanese media to convey their own voices. So Kega Pungun was regarded as the initial point of Hakka movement. So it also made Hakkanese people, they gradually ethnicized. So since in the first volume of the Hakka Monthly, many in that Kega Pungun, the magazine, many Hakkanese elites, they could establish their articles to discuss about ethnic consciousness or language family, Hakka ethnic, Hakka features. So Hakkanese people are basically united and also empathized because of this magazine. And originally, the Hakka Monthly, the magazine is just a platform for Hakkanese people to speak. But however, by discussing Hakka issues, it also had an effect to unite all Taiwan Hakkanese people and making other Taiwanese to know that, oh, there's also Hakkanese, not only Temango, there's also Hakkanese and also Wonjumingo in Taiwan. So this is the first Hakka magazine. So the first Hakka magazine, the first volume of it. So the first one, it writes that it is the first public tool to speak, work hard, service for Hakkanese people. And this is the first volume. It's publicated in 1987, October. And then it talks about some issues like Hakkanese people's role and position in Taiwan politics. Will Hakkanese languages disappear? Taiwan's first Hakkanese survey, do Kuomintang or Minjintang value Hakkanese people more? Hakkanese people's future in this transition. So the Hakka movement also have some effects to Taiwan people. So after publishing the Hakka monthly, the magazine, for 14 months, Hakkanese people, they launched the Hakka movement in December 1988. And people, they call for government's open access to mass media and also make Hakkanese could be included in the public and news. And also there are three main reasons over Taiwan society. So first, it labels the crunch point that Taiwan steps from the authoritarianism to the democratic society. And then the second is that it criticizes Mandarin Chinese being the only dominant language at that time in Taiwan. And also it highlights Taiwan's diversity with Hakkanese issues, which have long been omitted. And also have three other influences over Hakkanese themselves. So Taiwan started to have Hakkanese news period and also the first Hakkanese radio. And also their identity is localized. Before because they are immigrant from China to Taiwan. So before that, they think that their only ancestor, their only history is only in China. But however, after generations, after these things happened, they started to have their own local ethnic consciousness in Taiwan. And the third is that there are started to have the discussion of Taiwan Hakkanese and also started to have some discussion like Taiwan Hakkanese literature. So the developing of Hakkanese literature is that Taiwan's Hakka movement is actually highly correlated to the establishment of Taiwan Hakkanese literature. Hakkanese literature was considered as one of a way to promote and value Taiwan Hakkanese languages. So Hakkanese literature also construct Hakkanese identity consciousness. But we should note is that the definitions of Taiwan Hakkanese literature are vague because as the research also said that before discussing the Hakkanese literature, Hakkanese population, we need to firstly differentiate that Hakkanese ethnic people or Hakkanese spoken population are not the same because there are actually many Hakkanese ethnic people, their ancestors are Hakkanese, they live in Hakka family, but they cannot speak Hakkanese. So for some Hakkanese researcher, they also said that it is hard to ask all the Hakkanese literature should be written in Hakkanese. So if you study Hakkanese literature in Taiwan, you found that most Hakkanese literature, so-called Hakkanese literature, they are written in Chinese, Mandarin Chinese. You cannot see the Hakkanese language elements in those literature works. And also Hakkanese, so after that, Hakkanese literature's definition started to have different definitions according to different research. So Hakkanese literature could have two sorts. So one is written in Hakkanese and the other is Hakka related, have some Hakkanese elements. And the present definitions of Hakkanese literature are based on an introduction to the history of Hakka literature in Taiwan. So basically, if you written in Hakkanese or you talk about something related to Hakkanese, then could all be included as Hakkanese literature. And so Hakkanese literature here, they also have folk literature, although the concept of Hakkanese literature started in 1980. But before that, they still have their own folk literature. Here are some hill songs or nursery rhymes and also tea-picking operas. And hill songs is because Hakkanese mostly they work in hills, works for agriculture. So the contents of it are close to Hakkanese daily life. You could see that tea or love or living advice in those hill songs. And here are some. This is one of the folk literature in Taiwan Hakkanese. And you could see that tea, also love and life in these hill songs. I would read it a little bit in Hakkanese. 點愛茶來讓愛錢，茶杯朝上讓朝年，邊茶低上屯碌布，越線難忘阿愛錢. So it's basically like I drink your tea, I also get your love, and then
if I drink the tea with your love, then I will never forget about your love. And then this one is the nursery rhymes. In this, because of the time, I don't read it in Hakkanese, but in this nursery rhymes, you can basically found out the Hakkanese living situation at that time. They are really poor at that time, because the last two sentences, you will see that the poor situation of Hakkanese people. And also there are Hakkanese literature after that, also under Cheng dynasty and also Japanese royal period. But we should mention this, that these two developing process, although they are called as Hakkanese literature, but if you look into their works, you cannot see that how they write it in Hakkanese, or you cannot see any Hakkanese elements in these in their works. So basically, they are called as Hakkanese writers. It's just because they live in Hakka villages at that time. And also, although in the after 1920s, Taiwan started to have modern literature, and they have the consciousness to write in their own languages, but most of them still cannot write in Hakkanese. They might be cannot speak Hakkanese. Most of them could speak is Taiwanese, and then in their works you can see that they basically write is because it's based on their identity of being a Taiwanese, not being a Hakkanese. After Chinese nationalist governments retreat for like 1 and 2 generations, they started to grow the local identity in Taiwan. So in their works, they started to want to write in their own languages. So you can see that the last one, it says that all Taiwanese should think and write in their own languages. So the conclusion is that this study is basically emphasized the Taiwan social political background and its influence over Hakkanese literature establishment. So both the Japanese government and also Kuomintang also promoted linguistic imperialism led to Taiwanese native languages gradually attrition, gradually lose. But however, it also arouses Hakkanese elites to their urgent eagerness to revitalize their modern languages. And then also due to Hakkanese spoken people are less, so the definitions of Hakkanese literature, Hakkanese people are vague and wide. And this difficulty is basically shows that Hakkanese people and Hakkanese literature is also reflecting Taiwan Hakkanese preserving dilemma. So definitions of Hakkanese literature are wide to include both Hakkanese authors, their works, or their works written in Hakkanese languages. And Taiwan is still influenced by national language policy till now. So we could see that still now in Taiwan, the school, the common languages is still Mandarin Chinese. They still learn and teach basically in Chinese. And other native languages like Taimango, Kegango, and Wonjumingo, they are called local language, and you can only learn it for 1 hour in a week in schools. And Taiwan is still striving to preserve Hakkanese, but how do they try to promote more about the Hakkanese literature? So also Ministry of Education in Taiwan, they try to organize some competitions to collect more Hakkanese the works written in Hakkanese. And also the Ministry of Culture in Taiwan, they try to promote some TV or some programs they adapted the works from native literature or from the Hakkanese literature. So Hakkanese literature originally, it just reflected Hakkanese daily life, for example, like the hill songs. And under the foreign colonizers, it gradually became gradually gathered Hakkanese collective identity. And then nowadays, it became a tool, it became a method to preserve these languages and also to become a symbol to continue Hakkanese spirits. 네, 여기까지. 감사합니다.